Hello, EOS fans. My name is Shaheen Counts. Just a short bit about me is I am a physician. I'm actually a head and neck surgeon by day. When I'm not operating on heads and necks, I am immersing myself in the blockchain world because I think that the future is decentralized, and I find the topics of blockchain and decentralized systems and governance a fascinating one. I'm also one of the founders of eosBlocksmith, which is a block producer group based out of Silicon Valley here in the United States. I don't want to spend too much time talking about me, so I'm going to jump right into my talk today. Today I want to talk to you guys briefly about forks and sidechains. And really the goal of my talk today is to help you guys create a framework to view all of these projects and chains that you're hearing pop up within the EOS ecosystem and where they fit into everything and what they mean to you as an EOS token holder or an EOS developer. So let's, without further ado, this is just a little bit about eosBlocksmith. This is the team. We went to Consensus this year, and we're kind of evangelizing EOS out there. We were also at the Tulip conference here in the Bay Area a couple months ago. Okay, so let's start with some terminology. People use the word fork in different ways, and it's important to kind of create some common terms. So I want you to be thinking about three major categories here as we go through this. Number one is forks or chain forks. Number two is code forks. And number three is side chains. Now, currently on the EOS platform, chain forks do not exist, haven't happened yet. Code forks do exist, and we're going to be talking about some specific examples of that later on. And then side chains don't exist currently as well, but they're in the pipeline. So keep those in mind. Okay, so a chain fork, or this is what people talk about when they're saying a fork or a typical fork. So that is when one blockchain splits off from another blockchain sometime after the original blockchain has been running. Usually this arises out of some kind of dispute in the community about the direction that the blockchain should take. Both chains will share a common history, and often if you are a token holder before the fork, then you're awarded tokens on both blockchains. So this is an illustration of that. The reason people call it a fork is because it kind of looks like a fork with two prongs. The original chain are the shared histories in the dark blue, and then the new blockchains are in the light blue. So most classic example of this in the blockchain space is when Bitcoin Cash broke off from Bitcoin. That was over a dispute about the block size. Another classic example, not to use a bad pun, but is Ethereum Classic splitting off from Ethereum after the whole DAO situation, the DAO hack. So that's typical forks. So let's talk about a code fork. A code fork is when one group or person uses the software code of one blockchain to launch an entirely different blockchain. So they're using the same software code, but they're launching an entirely new blockchain. Usually they make some changes or modifications to the code to suit whatever particular needs they might have. So this is an illustration of a blockchain that's chugging along, and then you've got someone or some team that takes that same software code and essentially launches a new blockchain. The most classic example of this is when Charlie Lee took Litecoin, or took software code for Bitcoin, I should say, and launched Litecoin. He made some slight alterations. The biggest example, or the biggest modification he made, was changing the block size or the block times from 10 minutes in Bitcoin to 2.5 minutes in Litecoin. So Litecoin's transactions are faster, but it's essentially using the same software code. And so that's an example of a code fork. It's basically taking software that was used to launch one blockchain and launching another one with it. So in the EOS world, anyone can take the EOSIO software, which is open source software created by Block One, and launch their own version of an EOS chain. And that has and will be happening. These are projects that have done that or are in the works to do exactly that. So you can call them code forks, you can call them alternative EOSIO chains, but basically that's what's going on with these projects. And we'll talk a little bit more about these in a second. The last category that I want you to be thinking about is sidechains. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about sidechains because they also don't exist yet on the EOS network. But I want you to know what they are and kind of how to view them. So a sidechain is basically a sidekick chain or a buddy blockchain. It's an entirely separate blockchain that's linked to the main chain with something called a two-way peg, and I'll talk about that more in a second. It can have different rules than the main chain, but it's a big part of Block One's plans for scaling EOS, allowing transactions to be processed on sidechains, thereby increasing the overall TPS or processing power of the main chain is something called horizontal scaling. So this is an illustration of the main chain, and then you've got a side chain, and it's got its own blocks, it's its own blockchain, like I said, but it's linked to the main chain through this two-way peg, which is essentially this sophisticated smart contract that links the value of the two tokens such that the relationship between them is always the same. So for example, if the value of a sidechain is maybe half the value of an EOS token or EOS main chain, so 2 to 1, then that relationship will always stay true. Or maybe it's 10 to 1 or 20 to 1, whatever that relationship is, that relationship will be fixed between the sidechain and the EOS main chain, and it allows the value of transfer between the sidechain and the main chain, or vice versa. And that's kind of all I want to get into about sidechains. Again, they don't exist currently, but we're expecting them down the pipeline sometime in the next 6 months to a year. We're kind of looking to Block One and Dan Larimer for kind of to pave the pathway for sidechains to roll out and exist in the EOS ecosystem. So going back to our 3 categories again, we've got the chain forks we talked about, code forks, and sidechains we talked about. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the examples of code forks that exist, because the other 2 don't exist currently at this state. So, but there are code forks that are in the works. So, examples of code forks. The first group that said that they were going to take the EOSIO open source software and launch their own chain, independent of the main chain. This happened way back in April. It's the Wax Network. And basically, they're a group that is trying to create a decentralized marketplace for video game virtual assets. So people can buy and sell these to each other. They announced back in April that they were going to use the EOS software after looking at a bunch of different other blockchains to potentially launch theirs with. They liked the speed of EOS and some of the other properties. We haven't heard much about them since they announced that they were going to do this back in April. But they were the first ones to say, hey, we're going to use the EOSIO software. Ono is another example of a group that's taking the EOSIO software and launching their own alternative EOSIO chain. Now, they were originally slated to be a application on the mainnet, but in the last couple months decided for various reasons that they want to launch their own chain. Ono is looking to create a decentralized social networking platform, and there's a lot of buzz about this in China right now. A lot of people think that in order for blockchain to go mainstream, for mainstream adoption to happen, it's going to happen in the form of some sort of socialized network platform, like a Facebook or a Twitter that's decentralized. So Ono maybe could be that killer application that really kind of ushers in mainstream adoption. The Warbly network is another alternative EOSIO chain that recently announced itself in the last few weeks. They want to create a chain that offers a various amount of financial services. A big point of theirs is to be compliant with government regulations. And there's really kind of been a lot of interest in this project, especially since they announced in the last couple of weeks. And I'm fascinated to see kind of what will develop out of this. EOS Force is another alternative EOSIO chain. Now, this is essentially an alternative to the mainnet. This is a group of the community who, when the mainnet was launching, decided it wasn't being launched in the appropriate way and decided they were going to launch their own EOS mainnet. They are proponents of putting stability before speed, and that's kind of one of their big points. They are also a big proponents of one vote per token. So in contrast to their current mainnet where we have one token can vote for up to 30 different block producers, they feel like that's not the best way to align incentives and could create cabals. And so they decided to do one block, one vote. Apparently, or my understanding is this chain has launched, but they're not open to transactions at this point. They're trying to ensure that everything is stable. Lastly, there's the Telos network. This is essentially has been developed as the community, the EOS community, members of the EOS community felt that the current state of the mainnet was very susceptible to the will of the whale tokens, or whale token holders, or the largest token holder accounts. So much so that there was not a lot of economic decentralization, and they are seeking to create a separate EOS network where there are no whales to start with, per se. They're capping. So if you were an EOS token holder at the Genesis snapshot, then you are going to be awarded Telos tokens when that network launches, up to 40,000 tokens. If you were holding more than 40,000 EOS tokens at the time of the Genesis snapshot, then you will only get awarded 40,000 on the Telos network. But you're probably doing well in other ways financially, so not a big loss to you. They also are doing the voting weighting a little bit differently, and they want to create a more equitable pay structure for block producers, but that's the Telos network. I'm probably running over time, so in summary, I think a lot of people think that these alternative EOSIO chains or these code forks could take away from the mainnet, could be competitors in a way. Certainly some like Telos and EOS Force that are kind of like wide open networks where any kind of dApp could develop on those can be seen as that. But I see these more as other groups, other people who are going to be innovating, creating new ideas, experimenting in different ways with the EOSIO software. And I think that's going to just help make all chains that are running the EOSI software stronger, including the EOS mainnet. And I think they're all going to help to add value and create a diverse and interesting EOS ecosystem moving forward.